That's amazing. And this is called an orchestrion?
Orchestrion, yeah.
When was it built?
It was built in 1989.
Oh.
Yeah. I asked him
Amazing.
one time, I asked Mr. Bellhorn one time, how did you figure out how to make it? And he looked at me and he winked and he said, I Googled it.
Really?
And then I found out Google wasn't invented until the 1990s. So he
Oh,
was just
okay.
playing with me.
Oh, okay.
Now, before I get the video started, I do want to tell you about this display right here. It's about breaker boys. Breaker boys were little boys ages 10 to 14 who worked at the mine.
This is the Mauch Chunk
They didn't
Museum
work in the mine. They sat outside
in
like
Jim
breakers.
Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
They were, the breakers were the machines that broke the coal up into small pieces. It would come down beside the boys in chutes, and it was their job to paw through this all very quickly with their bare hands, separating the coal from the slate that had been mixed in. This is what the slate looks like when it's been broken into small pieces. It has very sharp edges. This would cut the little boys' hands all the time, but they weren't allowed to stop. If they did, the man in the picture there with the stick, he would give them a quick rap in the back or maybe chuck a piece of coal at them, tell them to get back to work. They had to sit there for 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, in all kinds of weather, extreme heat in the summertime, extreme cold in the wintertime. And for that, they might get paid $1 a week. I say might, because a lot of times they were cheated out of their wages. The supervisor, whatever you want to call him, the guy with the stick there, would say, oh, well, Sean didn't work hard enough this week, he doesn't deserve to get paid. That's how they would treat them. There was a man who came here who was not a party to this child abuse. His name was Josiah White, and when he came up here in 1818, he refused to allow children to work in his mine. In fact, he started a school for his miners' children so that they could be educated. He also came up with what I believe was the first medical plan in this country. He asked each of his workers to contribute $2.50 a year. And for that, the miner and his family would be covered should they have to go to the doctors for anything. Very amazing to think of. There was a medical plan in this country in 1818. Here it is, 2021, and we still can't seem to get it right.
That's for sure.
Now, let me get this started for you. When the video's done, do take a moment to look at the displays in here, and then you're going to exit this door, and we'll continue out in the museum. And you're going to see Mr. Drury, the man you just saw, coming in and out here.
Welcome. We have the privilege of outlining for you the fascinating story of Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, formerly Mauch, Pennsylvania. This town, carved out of the wilderness on the banks of the Lehigh River in 1818, was the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution.
The story begins in the Carboniferous era over 250 million years ago with the formation of coal. Based on the presence of coral deposits, geologists concluded that northeast Pennsylvania was once a tropical inland sea. They named it the Appalachian Sea. In the warm, humid climate, tropical trees, ferns, and plants grew in abundance in a rapid cycle of growth and death. Over succeeding millions of years, water, sediment, and rock exerted enormous pressure on the layers of decaying vegetation and transformed them into carbon or coal. About 100 million years ago, the Lehigh region experienced a series of violent upheavals. Intense heat and pressure within the earth transformed coal into anthracite, coral into limestone, and clay into slate, thrusting them to the surface as the Appalachian Sea folded into the Appalachian Mountains. Prior to 1815, Mauch was a desolate wilderness traversed by the Delaware tribe of Lenape Indians and Moravian settlers to the south. The region was serviced by a stagecoach road from Easton to Berwick, with stops along the Lehigh River at Fort Allen, now Weisport, and Lucerne, near Nesquehoning, a few miles north of Mauch, a town no longer in existence. Anthracite in this locale had been discovered by Quaker settler Philip Ginter as he hunted in a wilderness area near Summit Hill in 1791. Although Ginter was unable to obtain title to the tract on which he found coal, Michael Hilligus, Charles Sisk, and Jacob Weiss, the men in whom Ginter confided, acquired 10,000 acres of untitled land, a 4-mile-wide strip from the Lehigh River around Mauch to the Little Schuylkill River around Tamaqua, and in 1792 founded the Lehigh Coal Mine Company. A mine was opened, but when the difficulties of transporting coal across mountainous terrain and down the Lehigh River proved insurmountable, the enterprise was abandoned in 1805. The investors died poor in the early 1800s. A second group, this time Wilkes-Barre businessmen led by Jacob Sisk, leased the Lehigh Coal Mine Company for 10 years. They too lacked sufficient capital and ingenuity to overcome the odds and gave up the venture in 1817. In their efforts to be successful, they did transport through ark and cart small amounts of anthracite to Philadelphia and convinced important industrialists of the value of hard coal, developed a small domestic market, further explored and developed coal fields, and in 1815 established a transfer point to be known as Mauch Chunk for coal shipped by wagon down the Mauch Chunk Creek Valley from the mine at Summit Hill. Enter Josiah White and Erskine Hazard, owners of a wire mill near Philadelphia. When the British cut off shipments of bituminous coal during the War of 1812, White and Hazard were affected. Seeking a substitute fuel for their furnace, they turned to anthracite, but like so many other disillusioned manufacturers, they could not burn it successfully. The slamming of the furnace door in a moment of despair provided the answer. In a closed, ventilated furnace, anthracite burned with a white heat. Realizing what their discovery could mean to America's industrial future, White and Hazard headed north from Philadelphia to seek their fortunes in Pennsylvania coal fields. After failing to form a company to mine anthracite in the upper Schuylkill Valley, they turned their attention to the Summit Hill coal field. Believing they could succeed where the Lehigh Coal Mine Company had failed, they rented the company's 10,000 acres for 1 ear of corn a year. In 1818, they built an 8-mile coal road over the mountains from the river to the mine at Summit Hill, secured navigation rights to the Lehigh, and founded the Lehigh Coal and Navigation Company. They met with success mainly because of personal skills and tenacity, especially of White's engineering genius, vision, daring, persistence, and total commitment. By 1818, Mauch Chunk, Lenape, for Mountain of Sleeping Bear, was a bustling town of workers and families. By the end of that year, 40 buildings had been constructed and 400 acres cleared. With White and Hazard's ingenious combination of channels, pools, and bear trap locks augmenting the river flow, hinged arcs loaded with coal headed down the Lehigh on a one-way trip to Philadelphia. Upon reaching their destination, the arcs were taken apart. Hardware was recycled and returned to Mauch Chunk, and lumber sold to local developers. Legend has it that half of Philadelphia was built from Mauch Chunk timber. Although coal was now moving down the coal road in Lehigh River, it was not moving fast or efficiently enough for the Lehigh Coal and Navigation Company. A gravity railroad, the Mauch Chunk Railway, later known as the Switchback, was constructed on top of the coal road in 1827. Gravity was the motive power, and mules who rode with a train of coal-laden cars downhill while they ate, the first dining car, pulled the empty coal cars back up to Summit Hill on the same track. That same year, work began on a canal system from Mauch Chunk, which would connect at Easton with the Delaware and Morris canals. By the time the Lehigh Canal became operable in 1829, it consisted of 10 miles of slackwater pools in the Lehigh, 34.5 miles of canals, and 1.6 miles of locks. Not only could coal be transported to Philadelphia and multiple stops along the way as industries developed, goods and supplies could be shipped in the opposite direction on the return trip. In 1835, the Lehigh Canal was extended north from Mauch to Whitehaven, and in 1838 from Whitehaven to Stoddardsville. In order to meet increasing demand for coal, a backtrack together with 2 stationary engine houses were added to the switchback railroad system in 1844. The motive power for the return trip to Summit Hill was still gravity after coal cars were drawn up to the tops of Mount Pisgah and Mount Jefferson by engine house machinery. The faster coal poured down the chute from the switchback terminal to its waterfront shipping point, the more Mauch prospered. From a population of 700 in 1830, the town grew in size to 1,200 inhabitants by 1840. From a waterfront depot with a few storage sheds in 1815, by 1850, Mauch had expanded to the northern Liberties and Heights and over the river to the Kettle, or East Mauch. By the time Asa Packer brought the Lehigh Valley Railroad to Mauch in 1855, coal was in greater demand than ever as factories and mills sprang up along canal banks and train tracks. Sparked by Summit Hill anthracite and Mauch ingenuity, the Industrial Revolution in the northeastern United States was in full swing. As the coal and railroad barons grew richer, stately residences extended up Broadway along Millionaire's Row, with clapboard houses of workers winding up the hillsides and spilling across the Lehigh into East Mauch. On the lower slopes of Mount Pisgah, overlooking his beloved Lehigh Valley Railroad, Asa